or I won't be able to post it later. Okay, started. So for those who are watching later, you lost a couple of things, but not important. Don't worry, just blabbing, Italian blabbing. So let's get into the topic. The topic is physical preparation and physical fitness for in tennis. We will see different things, like not many, but different levels of preparations. For instance, let's start with warm up. Then we discuss some exercises that we do for warming up, and at the same time getting used to the racket, because tennis and all the racket sports obviously require the use of rackets or similar, and therefore it's not as easy as a sport in which no extra tool is required, because you have to learn to be confident with the racket when you want to play these sports. And then we will go into activities that are more done for experts or those who have played tennis for a long while, etc. Sorry. So yeah, good. My wife is showing me her outfit for today's tennis training, and she wants attention, you know. So let's start with the warm up. Oh, finally, some smiles. Yeah. Let's start with some warm up. So the typical warm up works obviously also in tennis. This may be of interest for you because you will also have to prepare a warm up with your team. By the way, have you seen the teams on in OLAT? There are all the teams already set up in a file in useful files folder. So you should know by now what team you are in, both for the tournament organization and for the warm up. And there are also in OLAT the instructions for carrying out the warm up and for the instructions for the match analysis. And other point that I open. If you have checked the instructions for the match analysis and if you checked the sheet for the statistics, do you have any doubt about it? Again, no. Silence is confirmation. Well, now I'm asking because I have two groups and you are doing basically the same things. The other group is doing the same things, and there were some doubts because not everybody is familiar with tennis rules or tennis stuff. So they asked me some questions. Anyways, when you have one, when you read those papers, those instructions, and then you have questions, you ask me. I just wanted to ask in case you had now. You can wait, either wait for the following meeting we have, or you write me an email and I'll try to be as clear as possible, because sometimes you get, okay, what does that mean? Anyways, so for the warm-up, traditional warm-up works very well, but I hope that you guys, for your warm-up preparation, do something a bit more specific, which makes more sense. Like you go into a part of doing the typical, running, flexibility, etc. That works for everything. I would like to see something a bit more specific for racket sports. So warm up with racket sports obviously includes rackets in many cases. That doesn't mean that you have to mandatory to hit the ball like in tennis you do, but you can use the racket for warming up, which helps you also warm up with the tool that you're going to use. If you go just talking theoretically, when you work with the traditional warm up and you had to start with something, so traditional running, flexibility, would you prefer to start with the running or moving, let's say, or would you start with flexibility? This question requires responses, not silence. There is no silence in this. And there is no true, no wrong or bad. I'm just asking for your opinion.
Moving? Yeah, that's
Sorry?
what to do.
Moving first.
You would prefer to move first and then flexibility?
Yeah.
Why?
To kind of get started and activate it.
Is there any physiological reason for that? Physiological. Fiona, you
I
have
don't
the
know
help. You have the help there, Fiona. No, I mean, I would ask. I'm asking it because I've seen many people starting with flexibility directly. Got into the court and flexibility, and that's not really smart to do or not the best solution. And as Tassilo said, the best would be start with moving. That has a pretty simple explanation, physiological, but it's more actually mechanical. Like our body is like a machine. If you start a machine where it's very cold and you want to start it immediately, want to do something particular that requires the material to be a bit warmed up, obviously it's more difficult to use that machine. Let's say that you have a very, very cold weather and you want to move a door, a heavy door fast. The door has been closed for days, so it's very cold. When you try to move the door, what happens? That is stiff. It's hard to move because it's cold. It needs to be lubricated a bit. It needs to get warm. When the material gets warm, it's easier to move. Same thing for our muscles and joints. The joints are like, when they are cold, they are stiffer, so it's more difficult to move them. If you want to start immediately with flexibility and you have cold joints, you have a reduced range of movement first. Second of all, you have a high risk to get an injury because your muscles are not as elastic because they haven't started yet to move, so they are still cold, and your joints are stiffer. The result is that you risk more injuries than if you moved. So the traditional, always, as Tassilo said, always, is Tassilo or Tassilo? Sorry. Tassilo, sorry. As Tassilo said, you start with moving. Anything that it can be running, it can be walking, it can be anything, but moving your muscles so they get started. And then you can either do the flexibility at the end, or you can do the flexibility in the middle. So you move a little, flexibility, move, flexibility, move, flexibility. But flexibility always comes after the moving. There are a couple of exercises that we really do a lot in tennis for flexibility because they hit the joints that are mostly used or are used a lot in tennis. One is for the wrists. It's an exercise that you might have seen. Many tennis players, before they start, they join their hands this way and they start doing this. It's just a warming up exercise for the wrists, because you are going to use a lot the wrist in some racket sport more than in others. For instance, in tennis table, you use way more of the wrist than in tennis, but yet since you are going to use it in any sport, so you do this kind of exercises for warming up the wrist. And one that is very important in tennis is the shoulder flexibility, or for shoulder flexibility, or shoulder, let's say, joint warm up. And typically, all exercises that allow the range of movement of the shoulders are good. In many cases, tennis players do also the exercise that simulates the serve. Are you familiar with the service in tennis? The movement of service. So many stand still, and then they do the movement of the serve in tennis as a warm-up exercise for the shoulder. So regardless of what kind of exercise you do, if you do it like service style or just simply rotations, etc., shoulders and wrist are very important joints that we warm up in tennis with the traditional style. Questions so far? Okay. So let's go into the next step. Hello. Someone
Hi,
else
sorry.
No problem. I was late too. 5 minutes. So you are 9:49 is also late for Italians though. Anyways, so we just discussed about the traditional warm-up and what kind of joints we do in tennis. Now we're going to something that I used to do in the past with the kids when we warmed up. a lot of exercises that use the racket, and at the same time as you warm up, you also get familiarized with the racket. You get used to the racket. So the typical exercises that imply, for instance, holding a ball with the racket. So you're holding the racket, the ball, you have the ball on the racket, and then you have to carry it around, for instance, creating a circuit. Are you familiar with that? You know what I'm talking about? You can be alone and just moving in the space, or you can be like, I always did it a lot in like challenges for kids, so teams. And then there was a circuit, like cones that you have to go around, and then rings that you have to jump into, and then you have to come back, etc. And all of this done with the racket in your hand and the ball on the racket. And you have to keep the ball on the racket and not allow it to fall. So that helps a lot. Not only, I did it mostly with kids, but you can do it also with people that are not used to playing tennis, or they are, beginners. And that is a familiarization game, so helps familiarize with the racket at the same time as you're warming up, because you're moving. This is the very typical that I do with kids, because kids like challenges and games. So we do teams, we do circuit, and then either you have to go around with the ball and then come back and that's it, or there is only one ball per team, and the kid has the ball on the racket, and then when he comes back from the circuit and comes back to the team, has to drop the ball on the racket of another person. So you help also kind of familiarize with the movement and the racket. Does it make sense, guys? Can you imagine that? It's good. Any other very typical also exercise that you do with the racket for familiarization may not be a game, but simply, for instance, if we had the practice, we would have done some of it. Use the wall hall for with each of you one racket, each of you one ball. Use the wall space and do exercises such as bouncing the ball on the top. You have the ball on your racket and you're bouncing it. Or you do, for instance, the bouncing down. So you have the ball, you have the racket, and you're bouncing the ball down. And all sorts of exercises like this help warming up, because you're running around the space, you're moving around the space, and at the same time, you are familiarizing with the tool, with the racket, because you're using it in different ways. So far, so good?
Yes.
I have some coffee. Italians need coffee all the time. So these are just a couple of exercises, a couple of examples. I use them a lot in with kids, especially. I want to open it again. Okay, I have a file that I will then upload in Orat, where I put all the example of exercises. And then there are all kind of warm up that implies rallies. When I say rallies in tennis, do you know what I mean? Guys? Fiona? Rally means that I'm playing with another person. A rally is when I hit the ball, the other hits the ball back, etc. And we keep a rally. That's called rally in tennis. So there are plenty of exercises for warm up with rallies. Let's start with the rallies all by yourself. When you are sad and alone because there is a COVID crisis and you live alone and you really want to play tennis. So you have a racket, you have a ball, but you don't have a mate to play with. What do? Many use the wall. Obviously, the wall must be free, not like the wall that I can see behind Tassil and Fiona's house. Like that would be destroying everything around. But if you have a wall outside, or if you have a wall inside which you can use because you have enough space, typical warm up by yourself is with the wall. What are you doing? From the very basic is you hear me well, right? Because there is a coffee on doing here, so there is a lot of noise from a coffee machine. If you stop hearing me, just let me know. There is the typical, like I hit the ball against the ball comes back, and I keep hitting the ball as long as I can. That's a very, very, very common warm-up and also training method for tennis players when they are completely alone. And another is with the serve. You all said that you're familiar with the tennis serve, right? You hit the ball from above. Same thing as the classical wall rally, but what you're doing is using the serve. So you are throwing the ball up, hitting, the ball bounces on the floor, then on the wall, and then goes up again. And you hit the ball again with a serve. Can you imagine that? That cannot, I couldn't show you anyways because I don't have space for that. So you toss the ball up, hit, like on a serve, hit here. The ball goes all the way down to the floor, then bounces on the wall, and then goes up again. And you keep hitting the ball up. It's a good warm up for the shoulder, and also it's a good warm up for tennis in general. Though it's very complicated because you have to have a good control of the ball because the ball can go anywhere, and then you find people running around the hall or running around the house because the ball ended up anywhere else. If you have a good control, that's very good. If you don't, then the classical warm up with the wall, so hitting the ball just normally, is very good. And then there are all the warm ups that we use with 2 persons. So warm up rally, 2 persons. This was warm up rally, 1 person. Now you are not alone. You have someone else to play. The very, very classical warm up that basically all tennis players do is on a short court, on the service area. You know the tennis court? So there is the baseline, and then there is a line in the middle, that is the serve line. And so most of the tennis players do the warm-up by playing each other in the area of the serve. So you are hitting the ball very, very short, very closely to the other, not from the baseline already, but from a shorter distance with the net in the middle. We were doing something like this with my wife here in the garden since we couldn't go to the tennis course. What we did is simply we have a table that can be folded, so it's straight. We put the table in the middle of the garden, and we were playing on a short distance. There are some examples in the video that I'll show you. And so you just hit the ball. Actually, I will show you the video so you can see it if I can find it. This I didn't have it ready. I'm going to open it though. If I find it. Is it this one? Oh no. No, I cannot find it. Anyways. So no, I won't show you the video because I cannot find it. But it's a simple just exchange with 2 persons at a closer distance than normally you would do in tennis. That can be done with bounce, so the ball bounces and then you hit the ball and you keep that. Sometimes we do also match in tennis, so we do a sort of a match on a small space. This is helpful because the ball doesn't go too far. So you keep moving and you keep warming up your feet, your legs, etc. Or you can do it without bouncing. So you simply do volley. So you're playing volleys. That's what we were doing with my wife because the garden is a bit irregular. And if you let the ball bounce, God knows where the ball ends up. It could go anywhere because the garden is like ups and downs. So we had to play like volleys. And I think I found the video, so I will show you this in the end. Or maybe not. Jump sprint rally here. This should be. Yeah. So let me show you. I will share the screen. I will put this. So see the table is in the middle, is folded like it was like a net, and then we are playing volleys and we are warming up. As you can see, you have to move quite a lot. This is an exercise that I show you later, but the point is that you are actually playing some rallies. Yeah, don't judge, please. I'm 40, and you are warming up your feet and your legs. And this is on a tennis court. you can do that for warming up, and it's pretty good. And you are just, you know, exchanging. You don't have to do it as a match, but you just exchange, pass the ball to the other side, and it's pretty good for warming up. So we said typical, classical, traditional warm-up with the stretching and running, which I expect not to see when you prepare your warm-up, your team warm-up. Please think about something different. You can use it just in the beginning, but then I would like you to focus on exercises that are more specific, that actually imply the use of racket, or at least imply something that is more similar to the tennis requirements, the tennis physical effort. And then we say warm up with racket for familiarization. So those exercises in which you use the racket and the ball, and you have to either by yourself or in teams do something for getting used to the racket. Other exercises can be also pushing the ball around when having the ball on the floor and making it roll with the racket. So pushing the ball around with the racket, for instance. That's also another exercise that is good. Another that I do with kids, I used to do with kids a lot when I used to train in Spain, was I called it the ball fight. The kids get completely crazy with that. It's very fun, but it's also very useful for either learning strokes, so forehand, backhand, which we will see next week, or just for warming up and at the same time start using the racket. Ball fight is or I also call it lluvia de pelotas. If you're familiar with Spanish, it means ball rain, lluvia de pelotas. Entonces, so we had now start to speak in Spanish. We had two teams, one on one side, one on the other side of the net. And there are a lot of balls on each side. Like, let's say that an equal number of balls, let's say 50 balls on one side, 50 balls on the other side. When I say go, each kid has to run and try to take a ball and toss it to the other side with the racket. So far so good? Can you picture that? Same number of balls per side. Each team's objective is to throw all the ball that they can to the opponent's team side, to the opponent team side. So there is a time, let's say 1 minute. In that minute, kids get completely mad, crazy, because they run to a ball, hit the ball, then run to another, hit another. Then meanwhile, another ball comes from the other side, and they have to hit it back, etc. And then when I say stop, we count the balls. And the team who wins is the team who has less balls on their side. It's very simple. This will be used, or I had it also planned for you if we had a practice to see it for learning the forehand and backhand, because you can tell the kids or the person to hit the ball to the other side by doing the forehand or by doing the backhand, etc. And it's very good for warming up. The only issue is the let's say the risk for safety, especially with kids, because you have, depending on how much space you have and how many kids you have, imagine a bunch of kids all around trying to hit the ball crazily to the other side. There are bleeding because of rackets hitting heads, or kids hitting each other, or balls coming from the other side and hitting some kid's head also. So you actually do these exercises only when you are really sure that the safety is ensured. So this sort of exercises. So think about it also when you prepare your warm up. Think about the safety. Like, can this be done in a safe way? Yes, no. In some cases, what did I do? I simply use balls that are for kids. In tennis, for instance, we have different types of balls depending on the age, because the regular tennis balls are too heavy for a kid. So when you hit the ball with the racket returns to the arm a lot of vibrations, and those are not really good for your body. Actually, that's all the point of the tennis elbow. The issue when you have pain and inflammation of the elbow. So for kids, that would be even worse, because the balls are too heavy in there. When they are hitting you, it's risky. So the Tennis Federation has made adjustments, and kids' balls are softer. They are actually like small foam balls. They are way bigger than the normal tennis balls. I have some here around, but I'm not really sure where I have them because my kids sometimes hit the ball with me. And they are a lot softer than usual. So you can hit the ball easily, but also they are not harmful. So sometimes I just use those so I avoid any injury. But if there are too many persons in one court, I directly don't do this exercise because people get completely lost on their where they are and where the others are. And you hit the ball and behind you there is a person, you hit them with a racket. But sometimes it happens to my kids and there are two in a big garden. Just imagine with a lot of kids around. So these are good exercise again, and other anything that if you do your warm up, let's say for beginners or for kids, think of exercises like that, like games that can be done that are not too intense because it's still a warm up, and that can help people get familiarized with the racket, have fun, and at the same time obviously move because you need to start moving before you get into the exercises. Questions so far? All right. So all these exercises that I'm telling you, when we go into physical training and not any more warm up, but physical training, can be used at a different intensity, and they are still very good for the training. But there are a couple of exercises that I want to show you that are more specific for tennis training and tennis physical training specifically. One thing that I always recommend is that to please, especially with players that are at a level that are higher than the basic level, to please do not use those exercises that are not meaningful for the tennis effort. Like that's the typical mistake that, not mistake, but approach that it's a traditional approach, but many have in many sports. For instance, I was a physical trainer for a soccer team in Italy for a couple of years. Not the main league, not Serie A, Serie B, if you're familiar with soccer. So this is the second league, so professional players, which they are already well trained and everything. And the main physical trainer was having the goalkeepers running 10, 12 kilometers per, like around the forest, etc., as a training for cardiorespiratory fitness. And my question has always been, okay, how do they use that in a soccer match, in a football match, like goalkeeper, 12 kilometers in a row running, that they have to run from one side to another of two posts? Yeah, they maybe cover a lot of kilometers during a match, maybe, probably not, but definitely not running around at a very low speed. Same for tennis. What's the effort in tennis? There is a lot of study on that. The efforts in tennis are, the tennis players typically what they do is 3 second sprint and then break, 3 second sprint and then break, 3 second sprint and then break. And then when the point is over, there are 20, 30 seconds break between one point and another. So the effort actually is really like more on the anaerobic, on the anaerobic side than any other thing. It's not an aerobic effort. Many coaches say, okay, but I read the statistics of Rafa Nadal and he ran 12 kilometers this match, in that certain match. And it might be true that they covered 12 kilometers, but I have never seen Rafa Nadal playing a match and running around the court for 12 kilometers at the same pace. Wouldn't really work for winning the match. What they do is these small, very, very sharp sprints and then break, sharp sprints and break. And maybe if you sum up all the distance that they covered, these 12 kilometers, but in fact, they are short sprints. So when you think about the physical training for tennis players who are at the higher level, I wouldn't go back to general fitness like cardio and this stuff, but all the exercises that we typically do are more functional for the sport. What do I need for tennis? Obviously, this differs from if you work on physical fitness in tennis for kids or for persons who need still to develop their basic fitness. In that case, you do. you want to do something that is good for everything, cardio, flexibility, etc. But here I'm not going to show you what to do when a person is in need of a general fitness. I'm going to show you some exercises that we do when we want to do a functional training for tennis. So one of the most common exercises, and I'm going to select it and show it to you, is called the 9 balls. I had it. Oh, it's right here. I will firstly show you in the video, and then and meanwhile we discuss about it. I just have to select. Now I will go share screen. This one. Again, do not judge. And I use the kids as a motivational support. So it's an exercise in which there are 9 balls around the court. In this case, there is no court because it was during COVID. So it's like on a tennis court. And as you can see, you have to pick up the balls. It's as simple as sprint to pick up the ball and then go back. Obviously, since the kids were there, I was also having a high five. They were high-fiving me every time. But the point is that this exercise is very specific for tennis and tennis preparation. Why do we do that? Because it really simulates tennis effort that you do on the court. The starting point, which is here, this is the starting point. It's like the baseline, the middle of the baseline on a tennis court. So you start from the middle of baseline on a tennis court, and then the 9 balls are placed in positions in which you may typically hit a stroke from the opponent. So there are a line of 3 balls very close to the net, and those are when your opponent plays a short stroke. We call it drop shot. Drop shot is a shot that ends up very close to the net, and you have to run very fast to the net to hit it. So the 3 balls that are further from the baseline, they are for the drop shots. Then there are 3 balls that are approximately on the line of the serve, and those are for when the opponent plays a short ball that you need to attack. Usually when opponent plays short, you try to attack and gain space in the court. So those simulate those balls. And those 3 balls that are closer to the baseline are the typical strokes, common strokes that you play from the baseline. So forehand, backhand, and a central stroke from the baseline. So the point is that here it simulates any type of position in which the ball could end up from your opponent, and you have to sprint for it. So that simulates precisely the effort of in tennis. And according to research, usually tennis players play, depending on which tennis player we're talking about, but the average is 9 to 15 strokes per rally. So 9 balls more or less represent the average number of strokes that you would have to play in a match against an opponent. And so the exercise, you can do it this way, that is simply with the hand. You can do it with the racket too. You can do it many different ways, but it simulates precisely the tennis effort. There is another thing that we do when we do this exercise that simulates again the tennis condition. If you have noticed, I'm not running fully back like straight, but I'm running laterally, or if you see when I go for the ball in the middle, I run backwards. See, I'm not running. I do not turn and sprint back to the baseline normally, but I run backwards. Do you think there is a reason for that, or just because I like to to get tired? What could be the reason? Thinking about tennis, since it's an exercise that prepares physically, but for tennis.
And the movements are not always like running straight. So you also need to run sideward to sides, and you need to run like diagonal cross or something. Yeah. I think there is a lot of different movements, but actually I didn't 100% get which ball is now which line to simulate in the exercise. So I cannot answer exactly why you're now running backwards. But
So
in
there are,
general,
yeah, on a tennis court it would be clearer because on a tennis court you place, there are 3 lines of 3 balls, okay? So there is the further line is very close to the net.
yeah.
So there is a ball on the left, a ball on the center, a ball on the right, and then there is another three balls on the line of the serve, and another 3 balls more or less on the baseline. The ball that I'm picking up right now is the ball that is close to the net, in the center.
Okay.
So Alexandra is right. But there are a lot of different movements in tennis, and another reason why we do this is because if you imagine a tennis court, let's say that where you see the small wall on the other side, that would be the net, and on the other side there is the opponent. You as a tennis player, you pick a ball from there. You never run then straight to the back because you would be giving the back to the opponent. Like if you turn your back towards the net, you don't see where the opponent is. Does it make sense, guys?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I reach the net and then I start running back normally. I'm turning my back towards the opponent and I don't see where the opponent goes, what he does, etc. So in tennis, you always need to have your body in a position that you always can see where the opponent goes. So if you run straight for a ball close to the net, then you want to go back in a way that you are fast, but you still see where the opponent is. And if you turn and just go back normally, you don't see it because you are basically turned on the other side. So that's the reason why you do that. And in fact, when you go on those balls that are center, you usually go back straight, like backwards. But when you do on the lateral, here I made a mistake. I will show you again. See, my body is lateral, it's not backwards, I'm running laterally. Since the tennis court in theory is the grass, I'm actually checking the other side. The body and my head usually have to be always turned towards the tennis court. So I would have to be the opposite. I would have to run laterally, but look towards the court. So look towards the grass, because that allows me to see where the opponent is. In this case, I am turning my back towards the tennis court, so I don't know where my opponent is. So the exercise is very simple. It's 9 balls, you pick them up, you bring them back, and that simulates also typical tennis movement, which is every time you hit a stroke, you then try to go back to the center, because the center is the best position for reaching any following stroke. So you hit and then you try to come back to the center, and that precisely simulates that. I go for a ball from the opponent and I go back to the center. I go from a ball to opponent and I go back to the center. And that simulates precisely the tennis movement of the tennis movements that you have during the competition. Questions on this exercise?
Not exactly, but can you tell, like, statistically, there are much more balls coming to the baseline, right?
Yeah, there are.
So if you do this exercise, it's more about the physical movement.
Yeah, definitely. Like, this is an exercise for physical fitness, as I said in the beginning. Like, this is physical fitness for tennis. But
Like,
then there are plenty of other exercises for technique or strategy, in which you probably do more on the baseline, etc. But this wants to simulate all potential sprints that you have to do in tennis. But yeah, statistically, you are more often on the baseline than in any other place, especially nowadays in tennis. So if there are no other questions, I will show you more exercises. This is the 9 balls. Then we have the reaction and footwork exercise. Footwork is another very important thing in tennis. Like, you need to be always on your forefoot and be ready to sprint fast and change direction very fast. So the footwork is very important. Apart of the footwork, there are other things that I will show you in this video. Let's see if you see what other things you are training in the video that I'm going to show you. But first, let's select it. I have too many. Oh, here it is. Okay, let me share it with you. All right, can you see the video? So what you probably can't see very well because it's difficult to see is on the right in front of the chairs and on the top of the chairs, there are small things, tiny things. Can you see them? More or less. Those are kids' toys that I use for my exercises. They are something that the kids use for constructions, but the point is that they have different colors. So each small thing that you see in front of the chair or on the chair has a different color. One is pink, one is yellow, one is orange, and so on. Okay, so far so good?
Yes.
Let me see if probably I can put the sound. So the exercise, I get in front of all the stuff and I start moving very fast with my feet. And my wife is calling colors. It's a 30-second exercise. 30 seconds is because in tennis it's very uncommon that an average rally is over 30 seconds. Usually they say that it's 18 seconds. Probably now it's more than before that it used to be before because there is much more baseline rallies, as Alexandra said. So you can also increase the time of this exercise, and this is a footwork exercise. What other thing do you, so if you got how it works, basically it's as simple as my wife is keeping the time. It's 30 seconds. Every 3 seconds, she calls a color. When she calls that color with my feet, I have to check on that color and then back. What other things do you think you are training here apart of footwork because you're always moving, try to move very fast with your feet? Is there anything else that you're working, Philip?
Yes, you are working direction. So you have to react very fast to get to the right color.
That's correct. A very important thing that you want to train in physical preparation in tennis, reaction time. Reaction time is said to be one of the factors that make a player better than others. Like there was a study on Nadal, if I find it, I'll show you, that demonstrated that Nadal had a reaction time that was significantly higher than the others. That means that you're faster on the ball. That means that you reach more balls than the other can. So reaction time is definitely one thing that you're working out here. Something else? There is one more thing for sure. No ideas?
Backhand and front.
Oh, well, I'm not really working it out. That just is for the simulation, to simulate tennis. But definitely the coordination, eyes, space coordination, or eyes environment coordination. That's another very important thing for tennis. Like if you don't see the ball coming, you won't react fast. So when my wife calls the color, I have to react very fast, but also coordinate very well the movement of my feet and my arms to react properly to the stimulation. And there are two types of stimulation in here. One is just foot, when my wife calls colors that are under the chair, and the other is also with the tennis movement or with the upper part, when my wife calls a color that is on the chair. So the coordination of eye foot and also eye space coordination is very important because, and is important in tennis too. You can do this exercise in two ways. One, this is a bit more complex because there is a reaction time, there is color pair also in the upper part on the chairs. So you have to decide if you go for the chair, if you go below the chair, etc. The very simple one is when you only have the colors on the ground, so you don't have the chairs. That's very specifically footwork exercise. This is more complex. Footwork, reaction, and coordination too. And so you can do, for instance, in my case, the example is 30 seconds, and every 3 seconds I have a color called by my wife. This also more or approximately simulates the time every time I need to hit the ball in tennis normally. I hit the ball, and then the ball comes back in around 3 seconds, depending, right? It's average. So every 3 seconds I would have to react to a following ball from the opponent. And so this is an exercise that simulates that, and at the same time works out the footwork, which is very important. Anything that you are familiar with that for working the foot, for using footwork without racket? What do you use for reaction or footwork when you don't have a racket or without a racket? Not specifically for tennis, but in general. What could be a good exercise that is used for coordination, footwork, and this stuff? I am asking you because a lot of students before you in this course have used it, a lot of them, and it's good for tennis too.
We do for reaction, like 2 people stand. One is standing behind me, and then he's throwing a tennis ball.
Oh, that's very good. Yes, that's a very good exercise.
In the air. So
yeah, that's
I
very
need
good
to
exercise for reaction.
look up and run very quick. You can also do it with footwork before,
Yeah.
and then use it.
That's very good. Actually, I forgot to make a video of that, but we also did that. The footwork plus, guys, did you all understand? I'm standing, behind me there is someone, I can't see the person, that person has a ball, throws the ball towards me, so the ball passes me on the top or laterally, and I'm moving on my feet very fast like I was doing in the video. As soon as I see the ball, I try to catch the ball before it hits the ground. That's a reaction and footwork. That's a very good one, actually. Another one that everybody does is the ladder. The ladder.
Yeah.
You have the ladder on the floor, and you're doing the footwork in 1,000 different ways, like 2 steps and then forward, or 1 step, 2 step, 1 step, 2 step. Like you can use it in any way you want. Ladder is a good exercise also for tennis. You can do it even with the racket in your hands, so you get used to that. So the ladder can be either without or with the racket, but it's a very good also exercise for that. So we've seen footwork, we've seen simulating the sprint, the repeated sprints, and now I'm showing you an exercise that also we do with the racket, but in this case without racket because it's physical preparation specifically, but still again simulates tennis movements. I'll select it and then I'll show you again. It's called left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Why do I have so many videos? Left, right. I will remove the sound though, because you don't need to really hear that. Besides, there can be some kids screaming during the videos. Okay. So you use anything that you want for like simulating the center of the baseline. In my case, I put there shoe. As you can see, the shoe that is on the grass, right there in the middle. That is simply to simulate the middle of the baseline, so the central point of the baseline. Usually on a tennis court, there is a very small line towards the other side that signals the middle of the baseline. That's in our case is 1 shoe. I have balls in my hands, and my wife here is performing the exercise that is left-right. In this case, is as simple as this one. So she's always going to pick up the ball as fast as she can. And then, yeah, my abilities to hold the balls are exceptional. And then she has to run for the following ball. And then always come back to the center. Here I tricked her too much. So this exercise can be done either, and as you can see, Misha, my wife, is simulating the exercise of the, when she gives me back the ball, she's trying to do it in a way that simulates the tennis stroke. This is a backhand. So she's not just tossing the ball back normally, but she's doing it in a way that simulates the backhand. Or when it goes to the forehand, she simulates the forehand. This simulates what this is connected to what Alexandra was saying. Most of the efforts that tennis players do is at the baseline, and this is a baseline exercise. There are two types of exercise in this case that you can do, very similar. The easy one and the complex one. The one that you're seeing from Misha is the complex one. I am tossing the ball anywhere I want, and I'm even kind of tricking her by looking on one side and then tossing the ball to the other side. See, here I did that. I was looking on one side, but then I tossed the ball to the other side. This is the more complex and more similar to the tennis effort, because you never know, your opponent will never toss the ball left, right, alternatively, but they will toss the ball wherever they want. So here there is a lot of change of direction, which is very important in tennis. There is a lot of reaction time again, and it simulates what happens when a tennis player is on the baseline. You have to run for a ball regardless of where it goes, and every time you run for the ball, maybe we can move from this frame because it's where my wife fell. Sorry, Mishi, she's right in front of me. And you have to go back. You have to go back to the center. So Misha is coming back to the center with a normal sprint. A tennis player would do a normal sprint for until a certain point. Like when you are very, very far from the center, the first few meters you sprint normally. The last few meters you run laterally, so a lateral run. And that is because if you're running back, like Misha is doing here, for instance, she's running back normally. Can you see her body? She's running towards the center of the court in like with a normal run. So if you do that and the opponent plays a ball again on the right of Misha, it will be very difficult for her to change direction. Do you follow me, guys? If I run and I run laterally, my change of direction will be pretty fast. I just push on my left leg and go back. But if I run straight to the center and the player plays back, then what happens is precisely this. See? That's precisely what happens. So you usually do run very fast back normally if you are very far from the center, and then you run laterally until like in the last 3-4 meters, you run laterally to the center. So you can change direction faster in case there is the need to that. The easy way to perform this exercise is to have a left-right alternate exercise. Instead of I can toss the ball anywhere and you have to react quickly, it's simply left, right, left, right. So the player always knows that the ball is going first left and then right. That's only for an easier way to do it when you have players that are less experienced or when you're doing an exercise that are less intense. But this is good intensity and good representation of what happens in tennis. Questions on this, guys? Silence. Silenzio assenso, we say in Italian. And the last few exercises that I want to show you are these are less tennis specific in terms of training, but they imply that you still use the racket. This is very good for two things. First of all, because tennis player, like everybody, tends to get bored of doing exercises, like purely exercises in which you have to squat jump or do this stuff. And second of all, because you keep working with the racket, which is always good and always more fun than doing the exercise as simple as it is. So let me show you a couple of videos that we do with rallies, but imply exercises that are very good for tennis player preparation. So mostly leg power in legs and power in the upper part. Tennis players don't really need a lot of strength, but they need a lot of power, like ability to use the strength in a fast way. So one example is the one that you saw, the jump sprint rally. That let me show you something different, because that I showed you before when I was giving you the example of the rally. This one. So this one is a burpees exercise. I hope that you know what the burpees. You're familiar with burpees when you do the exercise. Okay. Well, burpees. Since I'm performing it, it's not really burpees, but a try, an attempt to do burpees. So again, no judging. But so I am again. Remember, I have the table on in the middle. I'm rallying with my wife, so we are playing volleys. And the point of this exercise is try to keep the rally on, so no mistakes. As long as you don't make mistakes, you play. When you do make a mistake, you do as a punishment. When any of the two players that are playing makes a mistake, as a punishment, both players do a physical exercise that is good for tennis. In this case, we are playing volleys again, so we are still moving, feet work in theory. I'm really lazy in here, so I'm not doing it that much, but you should do the feet work, so you are training tennis. And then when the error comes, which will take a while because me and my wife are really good at tennis, there you go. You do 3 burpees, for instance, Armando style. Tassilo, don't laugh. That's the best I can do. And then you start over again. And then you start over in theory, immediately. When both players have finished, they start over again, and so on and on. And you can do it either with the same exercise, or you can add more exercises. In our cases, for instance, that's not interesting anymore. In our cases, we had other exercises. For instance, we had wall jumps. Let me find it. Jumping. Oh, here it is. No. Okay. Share. All right. Let me put it a bit forward. So this exercise, you make a mistake, is exactly the same. You are playing. You make a mistake, or someone makes a mistake. Commonly it's me, not my wife. And you do some jumps on the wall. That wall is very high, by the way. This is another example. Another example is when you do the sprints, for instance, which are also sprints to the net. I have it. Sharp sprint rally. I haven't selected. Share screen. This is similar and simulates also tennis efforts when you have to sprint towards the net. You are playing, so fun, better. You are still doing the footwork because while you're playing, you're doing your footwork and you're constantly moving your feet. Here I was less lazy. If you miss the ball, it's a sprint, back, take the ball, and start over again. You can do this in combination. For instance, this during the COVID lockdown, what we were doing with my wife was a series of exercises. It was rally and then squat jumps, rally and then lunges, rally and then jumps on wall. And you can combine all of them. You still use the racket, which is very good. And then at the same time, you're doing physical exercises that are good for tennis because power on the legs, power on the legs is very important for a tennis player. Well, that's not interesting anymore. By the way, this helps a lot a player, especially in periods in which they cannot play on the court. For instance, in my case, the other day I went playing tennis, and this racket that you see I used on the in the examples is a racket that I bought precisely before the COVID lockdown. And any tennis player, even if you are good, which is not my case, but even a good tennis player would need sometimes to get used to a new racket just to familiarize, because each racket is very different. And the other day I went playing tennis, and I have to say that I could hit the ball decently because precisely these exercises help a tennis player maintaining the feeling with the tool, or increasing the feeling with the tool, even if you don't have a tennis court in front of you. These are just examples, but my suggestion is, when you think about exercises, physical exercises for tennis, like I do or like other coaches do, is think about what kind of effort in tennis you do, and then try to reproduce it in on a physical exercise with racket and without racket. Because especially for tennis players who compete, your objective is that they reach the ball faster and they are able to hit the ball in a good way. So no tennis player makes a sprint towards the net without the racket. You still have to sprint with a racket. So whenever you can add the racket to the exercise, to the physical exercise, it's good to do. The last thing that I'm discussing with you is core. The core exercises. Those are, well, I do have examples with racket, but core exercises are essential for tennis player. A tennis player always plays in a way that the trunk is straight and keeps straight. And especially on when you hit the ball, if you check the professionals, they don't flex really the trunk or they don't move the trunk. The only thing that goes is the hand. The trunk is very straight and very strong. So you have to keep it still. So it's important to have a good core. Despite my wife always mentions that tennis players have big bellies, which is kind of true. If you check the professionals, you say, okay, that's real. Like, do they train really, or do they only eat a lot of burgers? But below that layer that the tennis players have, they need to have a strong core. And by core, I mean, what do you mean when you talk about core training? Guys, what do you have to train when you want to develop your core? Come on, it's not difficult. It's a question. What do you need to work on? What muscles?
Your lower back.
Oh, excellent. You started with the one that everybody forgets to mention. Like typically people respond, oh, your abs. Yes, your abs, but you also need your lower back muscles behind that. The core is the whole part of the body. If you work out only abdominals, as many do, as a mistake, you create an imbalance in the muscle tension in that zone, which is actually worse for the core. So you need to remember that exercises also imply the back muscles, not only the abdominals. Anyways, for you, in this case, I only have one suggestion. And then if you are happy to, you can try to use the exercise that I suggest you, because it's pretty tough, but it's particular, especially for tennis players, because tennis players put a lot of effort on their spine. So a lot of pressure on the spine when they do torsions and this stuff. And the typical abdominals that are done with torsions should be avoided, because you already put your back in a condition of risk for injuries. And so doing abdominals with torsions or lateral flexion is not really a smart idea, but you still have to work out your abdominal wall. The last time I had with the other group, I had a good discussion, because a couple of persons told me that, like from that group, told me that the abdominal main function is not expiration. It's true in a certain way, but what I was saying to them, and what I will tell to you, is that the abdominal wall, as a wall, works as a protector of the organs inside our belly, but also as a forced expiration muscle. What it does, like the wall fascias, without going into specific fascias, what it does, what abdominals do, is to pull down the rib cage in the forced expiration. When you do this, forcing out all the air that you have in your lungs, you are using all your abdominals, all of them. Not when you do the exercise, for instance, of torsions, you are using partly the oblique fascias. When you do the lateral, you're using very partly on the transversals abdominals. When you do the crunches, regular crunches, without taking into account your respiration, you work on the rectus abdomen, the central part, the central fascia, this one. In tennis, you should work out your abdominal wall, but you should try to avoid the issues that are related with the torsions. And a very good exercise for any tennis player is doing the typical crunches, but trying to, first of all, go up until 45, no more. Above 45, typically iliopsoas is the major muscle involved in the flexion. So until 45, and no torsions, but expiring strongly all the air that you have in your lungs. You go down, you go up straight. While you're going up straight, you do. If you still have air in your lungs when you reach 45 degrees, you stop there and you blow all your air out of the lungs. When you're done with blowing out the air, you go down. Do not touch the ground, but reach very closely to the ground. While you're going down, you're breathing in. And then again, you really have to blow out very strongly. And in that case, if you try, even if you try to do it right now, if you try to blow out strongly all the air that you have in your lungs, you'll feel that the abdominals are working, all of them. You'll feel all this zone, everything is working in the moment in which you're blowing out strongly, not just a simple expiration. And this is an excellent exercise for avoiding issues to the spine because you avoid the torsions, but at the same time you keep working the wall abdominal muscles, so you don't forget any. The obliques are working, the transversal are working, the rectus abdominis is working. This is very good also for flat belly. If you have ever seen at the gym, I keep seeing people that do these the crunches exercises without respiration, so they are keeping their breath. And what happens is that you're focusing mostly on the rectus abdomen. And the typical result is that you have a big belly, not a big belly like fat. You have a strong belly, but since the most used muscles in that case are the rectus abdomini, you have sort of bulk belly, strong and bulked. In this case, since you're working the whole wall of abdominals, they all grow simultaneously, and it typically helps also for the flat belly, not having this bulk effect of working mostly on certain fascias. So it's good for the flat belly, it's good for reduced tension on the spine, and it's good because it works out the core, the frontal part of the core very well. The only bad thing of this is, in my opinion, personal opinion, is the way the other people look at you when you're doing that in a gym. Like I did it several times and they are like looking at you like, this guy is crazy, what is he doing? But I don't care and they do it because it's good for me. So that's the only really thing that you may risk. I will show you one thing related to this, but again, this is not really the complete exercise, but I will show you just a partial because I was not going up completely. But I will show you this exercise, which is related. And sometimes in tennis we also do this, that we add also the racket to the exercise, as I was saying before. Don't judge, I'm 40. I'm expiring strongly. Okay, now here there was some issue with the kids. And I'm using the racket. Obviously you have to do it complete. This was just an example. And besides I had a kid that was really literally on me. So that makes things more complicated, but you blow, you go up to 45 or as much as you can, you blow out. And meanwhile, you can do also other things such as not having a kid on you, but simulating the tennis movement. My kid looks really relaxed in this case. I was less relaxed. So I'm trying to keep the trunk up, blow out, and meanwhile I'm doing an exercise that simulate tennis shots. Like it look really stupid, but it works very well for the abdominals and also for the coordination of the movement that you have to do in tennis, and at the same time the workout on the core. I know that I won't upload it in OLAT because that would expose me too much. That was the last. So power exercises on legs and upper part. Use a lot of racket and think about the movement, what is required in tennis to develop, and try to create or use exercises that imply the racket and imply the tennis effort. and core exercises. For the back, I don't have any suggestion. The traditional exercise that you do for developing the back are good. For the frontal part, for a tennis player, it's very important not to put more pressure on the spine, so avoid torsions. Expiration, if you have time, whenever you do exercise, try it at least twice to see if it works for you. I had in the other group someone trying it, and they told me it was pretty tough. For me, it's way tougher than the traditional exercises for abs, because you are working at the same time all the muscles. So if you have curiosity, try it. But this is very important for tennis players because it avoids the extra pressure that the spine has during torsions. Okay? Questions? Doubts? No, you just want to go for the coffee and go on with your morning, right? So, guys, we will keep the 9:30 time because it's the official time. I know that the first time we did 11, but I think that the best is 9:30 because that's the official time. So there is a reduced possibility of overlappings. And as you know, there is the calendar. So next week, I think that we are meeting again, but just because we switched the days. I had originally planned to meet you on the 1st of May, but the 1st of May, I forgot that it was holidays. So today and next week, but then follow the calendar that is in order to see when we are meeting and when we are not. As you know, the video is recorded, so I will post it, and I will post the exercise that I have in Word, and also the videos that I showed you, except for the abdominals, the last. That's not possible, that's private. If you don't have any other questions, then we will close it here. Thank you. And I'll see you next week. And next week we start discussing about technique. So forehand technique, forehand and backhand techniques, okay? If you have time, please check the video analysis of the match. So if you have doubts, you can ask me next week if you want. All right. Then have a nice rest of the morning. I'm going to play tennis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you
Bye.
next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.